Hello, everyone. Welcome to our very first Farm Yarns, kicking it off with the hemp season. Just going to keep letting people come in. A little slow start. Hope everyone's enjoying their Wednesday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. See some familiar faces in there. So as we're going to get going, if you didn't know, July is Hemp Awareness Month, and here we are at the very end of July. And so we're having this Farm Yarns event to really just bring more awareness to hemp, the incredible plant that it is, and celebrate it a bit. And we're going to talk about what hemp's role is in regenerative agriculture. And the benefits are far more than what I ever thought of for myself. I always had a pretty narrow view of what hemp was, especially growing up, and I only thought it was really just one thing. And so I'm super excited to dive into some of the questions that we have for our experts today. And the three people that we have joining us are Adrienne Snow. She is from Western States Hemp Farm. We have Michael, and I'm going to read how I pronounce your last name again. Klepacz. Did I do that right? Klepacz?
Pretty good.
He's joining us from Poland. He's a part of Natural Materials EU. And then we have Stephen Smith from Onda Wellness. And yeah, I'm going to just looks like people are still coming in to the chat, so into the room. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. And so, yeah, so if Adrienne, can you take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us who you are, why you're here?
Certainly. I'm Adrienne Snow, and I'm one of the partners of Western States Hemp, which began its journey in 2016 in terms of R&D, and we first planted hemp in Nevada in 2017. So unlike most who started in the hemp space, our first year planting was not in the CBD space. It was actually grain and fiber varietals, and we planted 3 different varietals that year. So that was the beginning of our journey. We've seen a lot. We've done a lot in both the grain fiber side as well as the CBD side, and that ultimately set us on a course to meet people that pulled us into a more regenerative path. So prior to that, we had been conventional farmers, farming alfalfa, corn, triticale, things like that. But it was really hemp that became the catalyst that led to what is today a regenerative farming operation.
Awesome. And Michael, taking it over to you.
All right. My name is Michael Klepacz. I fell headfirst into regenerative agriculture and sustainability in 2009. Since then, I've worked on a bunch of different agricultural related projects and things like that. In 2015, well, in years prior though, but in 2015, I finally started a company to focus on what could be done with hemp fibers, all different forms of hemp cellulose, whether it be strings, yarn, rope, webbing, paper, pulp, or otherwise. We're working on vertical integration here in Poland, where I am. I've been here for almost 15 years. So I moved to Poland. One of the reasons why is because hemp was legal here, and hemp became legal in the States while I've been living here. So the States are a completely different world to me now than it was since I've left. And yeah, my company mainly focuses on trying to recreate unsustainable products into a sustainable plant-based version. Um, we've done a bunch of weird projects over the years, some fun, some weird. You know, can be like a yoga mat that looks like a joint when you roll it up, that's completely plant-based, or you know, a hemp beanie, or waxed hemp yarn, or hemp notebook, you know, things like that. So that's just what we're focusing on here, is what can we do with hemp.
So much. Great. And Stephen, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hey y'all, thanks for joining. I guess my hemp journey started in 1999 when I wrote a thesis paper for my high school graduation senior year about hemp. And at the time it was to be a bit cheeky and push the buttons of my relatively conservative North Carolina high school teachers. But in doing so, I found that this plant has had such a huge impact and a big part of our lives for thousands of years, ranging from what these folks are doing with fiber and plants, bioplastics, medicine, on and on and on. So that really kind of sparked it, you know, over 20 some years ago. And then I was in ranching and biodynamic winemaking and regenerative agriculture. And then in 2016, I stumbled across some homemade, you know, CBD rich hemp oil, and felt amazing. It was kind of the relationship I was interested in with the cannabis plant at the time, which was you know, alleviating anxiety, body discomfort, helping with sleep, but still keeping a clear head. And so at the end of 2016, I started Onda Wellness. I'm the founder and CEO, and we've been on this wild journey, you know, ever since. We launched world's first biodynamic hemp oil, CBD rich hemp oil. And I was really inspired by my work with biodynamic and regenerative winemakers. And, you know, the folks I worked with were focused on farming on the highest level and then not screwing it up on the way to the bottle. So we don't use any extraction methods. We own our process. It's a proprietary kind of slow percolating infusion method. And we're really trying to partner with the best farmers we can and honor the nutrient density of that flower, that plant, to help kind of take the edges off life, whether that's sleep, anxiety, or inflammation. So we're working, you know, continuously on that, and we've really pivoted a lot into ingredient supply. So we make oil for a lot of skincare brands that see the benefits of this ancient crop. But I'm just really excited to be here with y'all and form these bonds and try to continue to steward this ancient plant to the people in a sophisticated and respectful way. So thanks for having me.
Right on. Love it. So happy to have you guys here. So we are going to dive into some questions for each of you and all of you. And if anybody joining today has any questions that you'd like to ask, we're going to have some space at the end of the webinar. And just pop your question in the comments, or I think there's a question box down there as well. And we will make sure that we have time for, we'll see what we have time for. And towards the end of this, see how many questions we get in there. But I will answer, we are going to be recording this. So it is being recorded. So we'll upload the replay afterwards. So it'll be available to see afterwards. So you have that. And so, yeah, I'm going to dive into it. I'm going to share my screen. And dive into these questions. Thumbs up, you can see us? Right on. Okay. Adrienne, can you clarify the difference between cannabis and hemp in the context of US agriculture and share your experience as a grower?
Well, at the most basic level, for if I was speaking to somebody brand new who'd never had any experience with hemp, at the most basic level, the difference to the US government between cannabis and hemp is really the amount of THC that is contained within the plant. So both marijuana and hemp are cannabis. They're in the same family. However, hemp, as defined by the US government, is the cannabis plant containing less than 0.3% of THC. So to put that in perspective for people who are not familiar with marijuana, and in a lot of states it is legal. So if you went to a dispensary and purchased marijuana, generally you're going to be purchasing flower that contains somewhere on an average of 15 to 20% THC within that plant. That'd be a good average. You're going to see a little bit higher, a little bit lower in places, but that's what people are after with marijuana. And so 15 to 20% versus 0.3%. So I'm just trying to give that so you guys can see how little there is in hemp. In a lot of grain and fiber varietals, which are going to be very tall, think more like bamboo. That'd be flax or bamboo would be a good example or comparative. There's often non-detectable levels of THC in many varietals that you could come across. Now, hemp that is being grown for CBD in the US, it looks bushy, more like a traditional marijuana plant. And to the eye, a lot of times you cannot tell the difference. You would only be able to tell the difference between hemp and marijuana by testing the flowers and the cannabinoids that are within those flowers. So how we have achieved that as an industry is that much like a dog breeder would continually breed to achieve a certain characteristic, over time, these plants have been crossbred and selected so that they're breeding the THC out of the plant and breeding the CBD up in the plant so they can get the most out of that plant. So really, it comes down to how much THC is or is not in the plant. Now, for
before you go on,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, the flower of the plant, is that the bud that we're used to?
That would be the bud, or you'll hear the term cola, you'll hear the term bud, you'll hear the term flower. Those are the most common words used to clarify that part of the plant. And I think one of the biggest things people need to understand too is when we're referring to CBD oil, I think that term is often confusing to people because CBD oil is really more like a sap. It's really not an oil the way we think of a viscose oil. Traditional hemp oil, when you see that in the grocery store, say it's in the refrigerated section, by flax oil, that is a true oil that is expelled from the seed of the plant. So whereas the CBD sap, if you will, referred to as CBD oil, it is actually a sticky matter that is on the outside of the flower.
And do they flower? Do the buds flower beyond that? Do they get like a traditional flower the way the plants do?
The bud really is the flower. I know it gets really big and thick, but that is the flower. That is what that plant is producing as its big, beautiful portion. So usually you will see people growing CBD will often isolate their plants to keep female only plants because they're trying to achieve high CBD rates. And the best way that I can explain that process in a metaphor that would be more lay terms, make it really easy, is as the cannabis plant is growing, if you can think about it like a teenage girl, she's going to put on her best outfit and her lipstick, and she's going to keep primping herself up so that she attracts a really great mate. Then often when we get a mate, or i.e. pollinate, so if there is a male plant in the area, as just like human beings, once we marry up, we kind of go into family making mode. And so that is when, once that flower has been pollinated, it stops producing as much CBD. It's not trying to primp itself up and be quite as cute and fancy. And it goes into baby making mode, i.e. producing the next generation of offspring. And it just wants to produce those seeds. So it stops thinking about the potent CBD and cannabinoids and terpenes and all the things that make it beautiful to attract in that pollen, and begin that focus of the next generation. So that is why you'll see people isolate their plants away from male plants, is because they want it to keep producing those high levels of CBD. They don't want it to go into an alternative mode and focus on something else. So it depends on what people are after. Whereas in fiber and grain varietals, obviously you want that grain, you want that pollination, because you want those seeds so that you can get the oil, you can get the byproducts like the shell or the hull that can be crushed into protein powders, things like that.
Awesome. And did you want to just take a minute to, I segued you away from talking about your experience as a grower.
My own experience. So like I said, we've done a little bit of everything over the years, grain and fiber varietals. And that's actually been a lot of fun to see what grows best and where in different growing mediums, different elevations, under different watering systems. We do a lot of flood, but we've grown under pivot. We've gotten far away from the traditional drip systems and row cropping in the earlier days when we first did that, and looked at the amount of plastic that was going into most CBD grows in the US, while people were touting how great this is for the planet. And when I was looking at visiting other farms and seeing how much plastic, whether it was the weed control or the drip system, was being torn up year after year, I think there was more damage being done by bringing all these plastics and ripping and tilling and disking and mitigating weeds through other chemicals than there was in the actual remediation of the soil by growing that plant. So that was a huge experience or segue, as my partner and I would travel and see different grows and see people who were so proud to be growing this plant, but not seeing the amount of petrol inputs or other inputs that they were using to grow the plant. And so that was a really big decision that we made, that we were not going to do that. We did that 1 year with a grow, and it just, we realized this is part of the problem. We are part of the problem. And I would say one of the biggest experiences we had was the day my partner, and this is really big for most traditional conventional farmers, is to say, my whole life I've said I was a steward of the planet because I'm a farmer and I'm a steward of the earth. And he stopped and said, wait a second, am I really? Because I'm ripping, I'm disking, I'm planting things that require pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. And so am I? And then asking that question of how can we change, and not just in the hemp space, but in everything we grow, and how can we help others on that journey? So our experience, I think, has been a little different than the average hemp farmer in the US, because we've been trying to tackle a brand new industry, but also do it in a little bit of a, it's tough to when you originally make the transition from conventional to regenerative and really do it without just being a greenwashing, if you will, but really walk that walk. There's going to be a lot of setbacks. There's going to be a lot of things that didn't turn out the way that you thought it would, or a lot of things are different than what you expect going through. So I would say the experience has been tough but rewarding, and getting to be part of things like this where I get to meet other people who are walking that same walk. It gives me, I guess, a little bit of a renewed feeling inside to know that there are other people that are starting to turn the tide. So
Awesome. I love it. That's such a good point too, to remember all that goes into agriculture and just the amount of drip tape and plastics. And when when you're in the garden or on a farm, you just think about, where did this tool even come from? Was this manufactured on the other side of the world? I mean, when you're thinking about regenerative farming and gardening, it's really, you kind of have to look at every element that you're using. Well, thanks, Adrienne. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Stephen, coming at you. When you think about hemp, in your case, within the context of the consumer packaged goods industry, in your current product line, can you talk about the potential impacts for human health?
Sure. I think one thing that's been kind of humbling and enlightening for me in this process is to realize that although we've co-evolved with this plant and its various uses, we didn't, from a medical perspective, discover the endocannabinoid system until I think the 80s. Robert Mekulam out of Israel discovered this system. So if you think there's so much gray and black matter in the body that we don't even know about, right? There's so much that science and otherwise hasn't really put a light on yet. And so I think that, you know, I really trust in what my body tells me. Obviously, I trust in science. I'm a big fan of biodynamic farming, the whole spectrum, everywhere in between. But you know, our body has this system that produces endocannabinoids that are relatively mirror molecules to what the plant produces, which are phytoplant cannabinoids. So the plant has so much to offer, and I feel like although we don't have a ton of research, especially domestically, because up until, what was it, 2018, it was Schedule 1, which says, according to this government, that there's no medicinal benefits, which is obviously malarkey. I don't know where that word came from, but I feel like I'd bring it back. It's total BS, right? And we know that in a pharmaceutical or a pharmacy context up until, I guess, the 20s, when the whole kind of propaganda campaign you know, came on to put cannabis underground, it was being used widely to help people heal. So, you know, we're constantly up against that challenge of folks saying, well, there's not enough research, there's not enough backing it. And that's true. But I really believe in the ancient and historical application of this, going back to Chinese medicine, 10,000 years ago. And I trust my body. I don't need someone to tell me how I feel or how I should feel. So we're seeing that, and we at Onda really believe in the whole plant. So we know that CBD has kind of taken the main stage. And for us, the analogy is kind of like, why would you drink vitamin C powder if you can have fresh squeezed orange juice? And we believe that just like we don't know a lot about our bodies, we don't know a lot about what this plant is offering. And there are aspects of the hemp plant, which is a cannabis plant, which I love that we shine a light on that. They aren't different. It's just a matter of this THC thing, this one cannabinoid that's one of maybe 110 or so cannabinoids that are in the plant. There's chlorophyll, there's polyphenols, fatty acids, terpenes. We found out that our hemp oil has gallic acid in it, which is really good for microbiome health and gut support. These are a lot of things that we aren't even talking about. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface of the potential of this plant. And again, you know, we're constantly struggling with trying to kind of invite people into a broader narrative and a more complex narrative, which is that Onda oil isn't CBD oil, it's hemp flower oil, and it happens to have a lot of CBD in it. We also have a product that has a ton of CBG in it that has no CBD and no THC at all. And these conversations are really hard because, you know, imagine 20 years ago, if you said that you could go rent a room in someone's house, they'd think you're crazy. And Airbnb is what it is, right? So people really don't imagine it takes a lot to invite people into a new possibility. And I really think that we're selling ourselves short by just talking about CBD oil or CBD extract. So anyway, we've also really leaned into the symbiotic relationship of other botanicals. You know, we think of hemp as a botanical. And so we have products that are symptom focused. So we have our skincare line, but we have the products that are ingestible. And we kind of wanted to add direction to the use of Onda oil. And so we have a product called Adios Anxiety that has ashwagandha, gotu kola, lemon balm, lavender, peppermint, passion flower. We have a sleep product called Solid Sleep, which has chamomile, California poppy, hawthorn berry, a little bit of cinnamon and cardamom. And we have an immunity product. And so we want to use hemp as this super botanical, but also work with other whole plant, whole flower botanicals to give it that direction. And, you know, I don't know, will it take the place of ibuprofen or other more kind of heavy duty pharmaceuticals? Maybe not, but if it can kind of mitigate, or if it can kind of drop the amount of these other heavier pharmaceuticals that folks are taking at times, then that feels like a win. And I'm not saying that Western medicine isn't highly effective and important, and we're in a place where we have access to it. No doubt, my whole family is in that side of medicine. But I just think that it's nice to give folks another option and to give them this invitation to the whole plant, to the botanical in its purest, most robust form. So we're along for the ride, but yeah, we don't have a lot of the research yet that a lot of other types of more conventional medicine have. But we're here for the ride and hoping we can keep, you know, working through anecdotal evidence and then more research with time. And we trust that we've been dancing with this plant for so many years for a reason. So
Millennia, yeah. What is CBG? I'm curious.
So these cannabinoids, these molecules that again exist in the human body, and I didn't really get into kind of how that works with our receptors, but and I can if it's helpful. But to answer your question more directly, cannabigerol is, they call it like the mother cannabinoid, but it's just funny. It never really got popular in the way that CBD did in which is a cannabidiol in the 2018, 19, 2020. But what we like about it is for our skincare customers, it seems to have really positive anti-inflammatory benefits. And the genetics that we use when we partner with our biodynamic farms, there's 0 THC and 0 CBD. So we're really focused on those plants because it's a bit of a loophole and a way to get around the just ridiculously clear as mud regulation around CBD and certainly THC. And so it's just another way for us to continue to commit and go deeper and learn about other ways to work with the plant beyond the kind of surface level or that first push with CBD, and obviously the psychoactive side, THC, which we've never really worked with other than the small amount that naturally occurs with CBD for genetics. But in my experience, it has a very similar effect, both topically and ingesting when we do our infusion as CBD.
And that's an incredible thing about it, is that you can take it topically, you can take it internally, different ways internally and different ways topically. So it's a wonder plant.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to learn more about what the other folks on this call are doing, because I think there's a bigger opportunity kind of connecting all the different aspects. I mean, there's so many uses for this plant, And especially in these transition stories, going from conventional to organic, you can clean soil. I mean, they've used hemp historically as a phytoremediator to pull toxins out of soil. So I see that as a really exciting opportunity in these transition periods, because we're over 99% of, I believe someone can fact check me, but last I heard, over 99% of US farmland is non-organic. So that means there's toxins in it and herbicides and pesticides that ideally we could use this super plant weed, right, a phytoremediator, to clean up. And then we could layer in medicine crops like what we're doing, and Adrienne, or we could do fiber. But I have some big dreams of ways to team up and use this plant to help heal the soil.
Awesome. Yeah, and like Adrienne was talking about,
Well,
organic farms. I mean, organic farms still use a lot of plastics, and they still use a lot of things. And so really taking that regenerative approach and adopting the regenerative practices, that's going to get us even closer. So if 99% of the farms in America are conventional, if we know that's true or not, fact check. But if that 1% is organic, like how many of those farms are practicing regenerative practices? So
yeah, and the plastic thing is crazy. I'm so glad she shined a light on that, because I remember so many of my or some of these other brands were making these big claims, and then you see their fields, and I'm thinking, do people not realize like how much petroleum and plastic is getting chopped into that soil? Like, it just made me crazy. Like, we have to think about, and not only that, in Oregon where I live, there was a big impact during the boom in the communities. There was plastic blowing across farmland that was landing on neighbors' properties and things like that. So there's a lot to consider. And then slightly tangentially, but just popped into my head, the upcycling and the connection that I'm excited to explore with these folks. But I have a beef business, a budding, very small baby beef business, and I've been feeding them hemp mash. So, after we do our press, there's still a lot of fatty acids and oils, coconut, MCT, and nutrients in that. And so using that as a cattle feed has been really fun to see, mixing it in with mineral and whatnot. So I feel optimistic that we are, again, scratching the surface.
great. And you're using everything from the plant.
And then the tallow from these cattle will come into a skincare product later. So looking at deep regeneration, deep connectivity and upcycling is really what gets me excited and helps me sleep well at night, if we can keep moving in these directions.
Awesome. We talk about tallow a lot in the garden club here at Farmers Footprint. So, but okay, I'm gonna move on to Michael. So, Michael, thanks, Stephen. I appreciate that. When you think about hemp as a fiber crop grown for apparel, textiles, I know you make papers and things like that. Can you talk about the versatility of hemp and its applications and use cases beyond growing hemp for food or CBD?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks for having me on this call. It's super fun to discuss such a historically significant plant and explore how we can, go beyond, CBD and these modern uses. Really trying to bring back kind of, let's say, the classic uses for hemp. So I'm a big believer that hemp needs to be the cornerstone for future development if we want to meet our future goals for sustainability. And I often ask myself where we would be as a society if hemp were not made illegal for 80 years. And that there's this just huge amount of irreplaceable knowledge that's been lost since then. And it's up to us to rediscover that knowledge and invest in growing and processing of cannabis sativa once again. So, hemp was a big cornerstone of agriculture and industry for generations. It was valued for its versatility and its strength. And in early days in America, as some of you might know, laws were actually made mandating the growth of hemp. Both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were supporters of hemp cultivation. Washington had a hemp field. Jefferson went through great lengths to steal hemp seeds from China, which is awesome and really, really funny if you think about it. He hired Turkish mercenaries to smuggle hemp seeds from China. At the time, that was punishable by death, exporting seeds from China. It was truly, the fibers and the hurd from it was a tool of the military industrial complex at the time. You had fibers for soldiers, for uniforms, sails, ropes, rigging for ships, as well as they would burn the herd, the ships, whatever you want to call them, for carbon, for gunpowder. And so, the economic significance of hemp in early America was a big deal, and Thomas Jefferson helped bring that to fruition. And so for over 2 centuries, hemp was so valuable that it was considered legal tender, and farmers could even pay their taxes with it. At one point, there was a census in 1850 where there was over 8,000 hemp plantations exceeding 2,000 acres in America. And that's 10 times more hemp just at that moment in America than what's being grown globally today on the entire planet. So let that sink in. And these plantations, of course, were producing hemp for fabrics, yarns, rope, and paper. Hemp fibers are incredibly versatile. Americans, I like to laugh at the American attitude these days towards fiber, because I'm always looking for long fibers, for my own productions. And I'll call Americans to see what they're up to. And they're like, oh yeah, we have long fiber. It's 2 inches. And I just kind of like, I want to just pat them on the head and tell them that's cute, because a real long fiber is 30 inches or more. If you had the right machinery, it could certainly be what would be 1.5 meters in, oh, whatever. Let's just call it 4 to 5 feet of fiber if you had the right machines. And so, hemp fibers are great because they're stronger, more durable than cotton. They're great for a wide range of applications. Hemp also requires much less water to grow than cotton. It's way more sustainable because of that. Typically, you can grow hemp just from rainwater, especially for fiber varieties. It grows so tall it really shades the soil, and it has a pretty decent taproot, though it's not a true taproot. So as a fiber, hemp is also more water absorbent than cotton, which makes it great for breathable clothing. It's actually a bit of a double-edged sword. Like the beanies that I make, for example, they're warm, they're wonderful to wear like on the farm on above freezing days. But once you start hitting those freezing temperatures, like it's not a warm hat, not like wool, So every fiber has its purpose. But so before the 18th century, a lot of paintings were made on hemp canvas. I actually found a paper that was studying the paintings made in the Louvre, and they found that over 80% of the canvases were made from hemp. And I started to dig into it. I actually found the person who wrote the paper, and it was because hemp was so prevalent in the Netherlands. They were using the hemp seed oil for making the base for their paints, and hemp fibers for their canvases as well. Today, we have a resurgence in use for hemp in textiles. We see hemp starting to replace linen because it's more drought tolerant. And also in America, hemp is being cottonized and blended with cotton, which is encouraging because it's bringing both worlds together, and the best qualities of each. Hemp clothing is becoming more and more popular due to its durability, breathability, and environmental benefits, not to mention the benefits for our own skin, not needing to have clothing that is made of chemicals. Hemp production for cellulose also outperforms wood on an acre per acre basis over time. It is higher in cellulose than wood, which is higher in lignin. So it is a superior way to sequester carbon, perfect for paper making, and the fibers of this cellulose can be recycled more than wooden cellulose. Hemp fibers can be also used in pultrusion. This is pretty cool. This is kind of the opposite of extrusion, where you basically take the yarns, you put it in a bath, and you put it through a heated profile, and out comes things like shapes for window trim or I-beams or whatever, or even tent poles. So it's an interesting replacement for carbon fiber and fiberglass, though depending on certain variables, it has a good strength to weight ratio, but it's not as strong as carbon fiber. But I think there's use cases for each. one of the most famous examples of kind of hemp plastics, if you will, was this so-called hemp car, which I need to actually dispel as much as I don't want to be the person to publicly do this. It was actually mostly made of soy and did have some hemp cellulose in it, but it wasn't by any means just a hemp car. But this was done by Ford in the wartime because of metal shortages, and so it was made of flax, wheat, and spruce pulp. It was 25% lighter than steel, and it claimed to be 10 times stronger. Ford also wanted hemp ethanol, and believe it or not, the person who invented the diesel engine to specifically run on seed oil. So though I do enjoy hemp seed oil and hemp heart oil, especially for food, it could in some form help us with fuels in the future. Non-woven hemp fibers are being used as well for insulation and housing of roofs, replacing that disgusting pink itchy fiberglass. And also they can be used for growing mats, similar to what you see with coconut fiber for growing sprouts or other use in greenhouses, as well as you can compress it to make biodegradable pots. And right now we need to invest in the development of mills and farming equipment for growing, harvesting, retting, processing of these fibers, so that we can, yield long fibers and then get these short fiber constituents, as well as hurd for use in clothing, accessories, paper, insulation, growing mediums, fuels, composites, and more. And I'm happy to take any questions on this topic.
I am sold. I'm so sold. That's amazing. I mean, it's really, you really wonder why we've strayed so far from this plant.
Don't get me started with conspiracies.
That's not even a
I
conspiracy.
mean, it's a threat to the infrastructure that was in place,
Yeah,
the
amazing.
Hearst family and these families really suppress the potential of this because of their vested interest in timber and other. Michael, I'm sure, can go much deeper in that, but it's a pretty dark thing. And then they spun it into a immigrant campaign, basically a racist campaign against Latino immigrants in the 1920s, right? I mean, that's what I read. So,
Yep, it's true.
Yeah, and some of the stories that we were posting on Farmer's Footprint today, I didn't realize some of those, that the Declaration of Independence was on hemp paper. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the paper. So before the 1830s or so, when Germany figured out how to turn trees into paper, most paper was what was called rag paper. So all of us, especially before the cotton gin was invented, most of us human beings at the time were running around with various types of vegetable fibers, mostly bast fibers, right? So hemp, sisal, rami, canaf, etc. Cotton was very hard to deal with and process before the cotton gin. And so, yeah, with hemp and linen, especially in North America, you would take your old clothing and sell them to the mill, and they would boil it down and destroy it and turn it into cellulose pulp for making rag paper. And so this rag paper is pretty cool stuff. And don't forget to charge your computer so it doesn't die.
Oh yeah. Thanks. We've got tons of questions in the chat, so I'm gonna move on to some chat questions now, and I'm gonna direct this first one to Stephen, but you all can chime in. So if you use the plant to pull toxins out of contaminated soil, can you still use the plant for edible products or for skincare? Would there still be toxins in the plant?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I want to hear what everyone else has to say, because I haven't gone deep down this from a research perspective, because it's just not our time to focus energy on it. But the short answer would be no, probably not, right? Because my guess is that if you're using hemp to sequester toxins and pull that out of the soil, you would need to put that into something else. And certainly not an ingestible, certainly not a medicinal or topical product. That doesn't really make sense to me. So what I was thinking is, and I would love to hear from the other two here, do these toxins, do these herbicides, pesticides, do they off gas? Like, what's the the half-life is really huge, but can we put them into a building application where they aren't toxic? You know, what can we do with that hemp other than use it purely as a phytoremediator? And then where does it go? You know, I mean, you're pulling something that doesn't just go away out of the soil, so it's no longer in the soil. So that's kind of the next step of the problem solving is what would be a practical application of hemp that does have fiber. Most likely, if you're using it for phytoremediation, I would assume you're using fiber hemp and not medicine hemp, as I call it. But what do you two think?
I would say also the short answer is no. I'm not. I think for sure it does depend on, I guess, on what the toxin is that's being remediated, right? Like there were rumor that they used hemp around Chernobyl.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing about it is from a remediation point of view for me is that it's a very well established plant for self-seeding, right? And so you can pretty much just cut it on the field after it's released its seed and just let it regrow year after year after year in the same space, rebuilding the soil. But yeah, I'm no chemist when it comes to that. I know for sure that I'm very cautious about where I get my CBD oils from because, you know, especially certain regions in China have a lot of heavy metal and things like that, and so that's why I prefer to deal with getting cellulose and fibers and extracts and things from soils I consider safe.
And that's why we're so committed to Demeter biodynamic or organic, or we have to know the farm that we work with. We really only work with one at this point, but I mean, if it's a phytoremediator, you're ingesting what's in the soil. And so partnering with folks that have built up super healthy soil is paramount and a non-negotiable for us if we're going to be selling something that's going into people to make them feel better. And I had a friend in California who was buying hemp flower from a farm near Ventura, and they were just testing through the roof for cadmium, and they didn't tell them that. They did their own independent testing and found that out and opted out of using that in some of their fresh juices. So especially during that era, 1920, when there was a boom, I think people were just planting anywhere. And so it was really hard unless you know the brand, you can see the farm, and you have the transparency that we try to offer. You could have been consuming some really nasty stuff.
I guess to add to that, we did do a lot of testing in our early days. And because it is such a good remediator and has such a massive uptake into the root systems, one of the things that I could see for people going into CBD, if they're planting into a traditionally farmed piece of land where there probably have been a lot of herbicides, pesticides, etc., put there, and not had as a subsequent result is that you're not going to have any biological activity. You're literally killing it. So we talk when we have a talk with people introducing them to regen. I remember I love etymology. I'm kind of a nerd. And so looking at the word side, it literally means to kill. And we don't think about that. So genocide, suicide, homicide, we all know that is a really, like, those are not good words, but we've become so complacent when it comes to pesticide, fungicide, herbicide. But really what we're doing is killing everything in there. And then we're adding other chemicals. So when you are using a plot of land that's been treated traditionally or conventionally, I think it would be a wise idea to plant a fiber crop of some type for your first go round to bring all of that up and out of the soil before attempting to produce a CBD crop that would be used for human consumption. I'm not a scientist, but the first two things that come to mind that I think are realistic uses of the hemp herd thereafter would be to be something like a hempcrete, where those pieces of shiv or herd are contained within other substrates. Could they off gas? Possibly, but are they, I would think that they are more safe contained in those substrates and not, that would be the best use. Or I've never seen any data, but could be turned into some sort of biochar or activated carbon that goes into a remediation use, say in EPA cleanup sites, not necessarily an activated biochar that could then be used for, you know, a nutraceutical fashion, but definitely something that could further help in an industrial fashion.
That's why a dream coalition would be us, right? Because we can stage it a transition farm potentially in those steps where the first couple years is a hempcrete, the next couple years could be fiber, and get closer to crops that are more intimate to the body, or maybe you stay in fiber, but that would be the dream, is some sort of partnership where these different types of hemp and these different applications could be applied to transitional properties. We just don't have a lot of infrastructure. I mean, that's why you're in Poland, right? Or one of the reasons, I guess. The US is really lacking in infrastructure. And my friends that sell hemp clothing in the United States, they're getting it from Canada and China. And I was talking to an investment firm years ago about a big hemp campus in the Southeast that was gonna, invest in all the infrastructure. But that's a big hurdle that we have in the United States right now, is no one's written the check to build those plants and to invest in the supply chain. So if anyone here is up for that, we're here for it.
100%. There's another question along the lines of phytoremediation. I'm not sure if Michael touched on this at all, but when hemp is used in phytoremediation, do the plants have to be harvested every year, or can they stay intact so that the roots are still doing the underground magic and pulling up the toxins?
Well, hemp lives for one season, so
it'll fall down and die. And
yeah, like it will definitely replant. It definitely will replant itself because of the amount of seeds. Like even if you do a hermaphroditic, breed, which is what is typical for industrial agriculture, we've tried to breed away the males, especially when used for fibers, because as soon as the males pollinate, essentially they die, and the females go on to live for a while longer. And basically you just have a bunch of males clogging up your harvesting equipment when you're trying to cut down your female hemp to do the retting process. But yeah, so for example, like Maciej Kowalski here in Poland, he does, and a lot of people in Finland do it, people in Ukraine do it. They do what's called winter retting, and basically you plant in May and you cut it down in March, and so all the seed falls out, and a big amount of nutrients and things fall back into the soil and stuff like that. But yeah, the seeds will seed themselves, which technically is illegal. So then you have to try to figure out how to prevent those previous year's seedlings from coming up, and then replant your certified seed.
Wow. Anything to add to that, Adrienne?
I think my thought just in hearing that is, when you think of the sentence that he just said, it's technically illegal, and it's because we as human beings are always trying to control everything. And that's really what, as we've embraced this regenerative journey, being raised or brought up in a way that we're trying to control every aspect of farming, from yield to when things flower, and on the exact day we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And really part of being a regenerative farm is allowing instead of forcing and controlling. Again, going back to my partner, he always says seed is smart. A lot of times we'll plant something and it was supposed to come up, the package said it comes up on this day. But he said, there's times I've planted stuff that was non-coated and it didn't come up that year at all. But then the next year, everything came up. So that seed knew that the conditions weren't right for it at that time, and it waited. So I think in terms of regenerative in particular, we have to wrap our heads around an entirely different set of rules than what we have been taught over the last 30, 40 years when it comes to farming.
We've got time for one more question, and I'm going to have Mel, if you can put everybody's information where everybody can find and support all three of our guests today. You can just put that in the chat, and I highly recommend going and following everybody along. The stuff that Mike posts on LinkedIn is mind-blowing. It's one of my, I go on LinkedIn pretty much just to read Mike's posts on hemp and all the history and the crazy things that it can do. But while Mel does that, I'm going to get into this last question, which just came up to me recently too. If either three of you or any three of you, have you ever, do you have any insight into the relationship between hemp and bacteria? And they wrote Pseudomonas as the bacteria, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I got an email from somebody who said that they got a very comprehensive blood test and they tested positive for a hemp virus. Now, I've never heard of that before. And it doesn't seem like any of you have heard of that either. So, interesting.
The first thing that comes to mind, I wonder if it's somehow related or similar to the tobacco mosaic virus. But no, I've never heard of that. But obviously, plants can get viruses. So,
well, that's a spin-off question then that I just thought. What family do hemp plants live in? What family are they a part of? And so what other diseases and pests do they share within that family? Adrienne?
I'm trying to think of pests that really move in to hemp. There are certain caterpillars that like to take over hemp. And one of the biggest things to combat that has really been to get away from monocropping. So we do plant in 2 cover crops. And for anyone who goes to our farmer's footprint story, you can actually see how we plant into cover crops. So it'll look a lot different. And that's a CBD crop, just for the record, it was not a fiber crop that was showcased in that particular piece. But some of the ways you can avoid pest pressure that does like to come into hemp is to make sure you're not monocropping.
Well, that was an incredibly insightful hour. My mind is, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you everybody for joining us and celebrating this incredible plant that we've been interacting with for thousands of years as humans. So I make sure that you take down everyone's information in the chat, copy it, put it on your notes, put it on your desktop. Thank you guys. This has been really awesome.
I'm just going to throw out there from the Farmers Footprint community, if you want to have access to this recording, because there was so much information, it will be on our Mighty Network community page. It's free to join. And then also I am seeing that this chat was the best chat ever and everyone was just really supporting each other. So after this call, Andrew and I are going to get together and see if we can also put all of these links that were shared by Michael and our participants today, so you guys can have access to those links as well, because there is a lot of goodness over there. So the link for the community is in the chat. Keep an eye out for the recording and keep an eye out for access to these links and resources. And thank you so much for coming today.
Definitely. Thanks, Mel.
And I would add that please reach out. We need you guys to help build this community and spread the word. And we're here for it. At least we are, I'm sure. So stay in touch if you have any questions, and thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Mel and Andrew, is our information available for the three of us if people have questions?
Definitely.
I
And
did
I'm
put
gonna-
your group email in, but I can put your emails in the chat as well really quickly. If you guys, I didn't want to put them in there, but if y'all are comfortable with sharing your emails, I'm happy to throw those in the chat as well really quickly.
Yeah, I am.
Hold on one second. Those emails are going to be coming to the chat live.
And like Mel said, we're gonna post all this information within the replay. So definitely get into, if you're not in our community, it's an awesome place to be. There's 9,500 people in there, passionate, interested individuals. I love it there. So this info is going to be in there with the replay. And I'll let Mel get the emails out there.
Those emails are in there, and copy them down really quickly, and then they will all be online in the community as well. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Enjoy the rest of your day or evening.